Good morning, this is Steve with Open Water Chicago. We're going to do a quick video on immersion shock and some techniques, or one in particular that we're going to show today, that you can do to minimize it or possibly even prevent it altogether. So what is immersion shock? Very quickly, immersion shock is a set of physiological responses, a shock response that occurs when an individual, especially a swimmer, exposes himself or herself suddenly to cold water. Now, it's characterized typically by two things: a spike in your heart rate, a spike in your respiration rate. Now, if it's intense enough and severe enough, it can actually be fatal. You can get tachycardia, which is an elevated heart rate that could actually lead to heart attacks, drowning, death. Those are three things we want to avoid. So how do we do that? How do we successfully manage that part of the swimming this time of year, so that that isn't an issue, or it's a very minimal issue? We've managed that risk. Probably the best way to do this, first of all, take inventory on what is happening physiologically. You know, what's the reality of how we're wired? Look at what's known as our core, specifically our head and our torso. This is where we have the highest concentration of skin temperature receptors. In other words, we get feedback from the environment, it's processed this way, and our body responds physiologically. So the idea of managing immersion shock centers around using this to our advantage. So what does this mean, and what can we do about it? Well, the fundamental technique for managing immersion shock is something known as priming. And we can do that in one or two ways. We can use a progressive cold shower technique, which I've written about and we'll talk about in a separate video, or we can do somewhat more of an unorthodox technique called the snow bath, which we'll see in a couple minutes over here. And both of them are designed to do the same thing. They're designed to expose the head, the neck, the torso, basically the core, where we have the highest concentration of skin temperature receptors, expose that to colder temperatures and kind of switch on the body's physiological heat generation switch. It's an interesting phenomenon. I did this last week, actually did this technique, which will show you, the snow bath, right before we swam over at Montrose Beach, and worked exceptionally well. And once again, the idea is we want to prepare the body so that immersion into the colder water temperatures does not cause this immersion shock response, this spike in the heart rate, this spike in the respiration rate, which, if unmanaged, can cause a fatal response. So let's talk a bit about maybe some of the ways to prep for this. Okay, so we're looking at priming our body through the fascinating technique known as the snow bath. So what do we need to do? What do we need to prepare for this? Well, first of all, obviously, we need snow. And we were lucky enough, living in the Midwest near the Great Lakes region, we got a nice, ample snowstorm last night. And let me tell you something, this is a perfect type of snow because, as you can see, it's nice and powdery. It's not that heavy, wet snow. So it's exactly what we're looking for. Second, what you need is, I usually clear the walkway from the house so that I've got a nice little area there that I can run in and run out, do whatever I need to do. Third, I've got a pair of flip-flops which I will wear while I do my snow bath. And the reason for that is pretty fundamental. Whenever you expose your core, your head and your torso to colder temperatures, whether it's through a cold shower or whether it's through exposure to a snow bath, what happens is that the heat rushes to your core and away from your extremities. So your hands and your feet tend to get colder. When we're swimming, it's not a big deal because we're wearing gloves and booties, but for the purposes of this, if my feet tend to be a lot colder, it can be a bit uncomfortable if I'm rolling around in the snow and I don't have anything to cover my feet. So I usually wear a pair of flip-flops, and that's pretty much it. The only other thing you need to do is just have a towel. I usually put one on the ground and have one separate because you're going to be dripping with the snow and you want to towel off pretty quickly, but it's pretty simple. Okay, the moment of truth has arrived. we're going to keep this very quick, and it doesn't need to be that extended. So the key thing, remember, is expose your face, your neck, your torso, where your skin temperature receptors are the most highly concentrated. You notice I'm just wearing a swimsuit. I got my flip-flops on. So here we go. I especially concentrate on my face, my neck, because that's one of the first things that's going to be exposed to the water where you're going to really feel the shock. So, of course, if you're feeling especially ambitious, you know, you just jump right in. That's it. That's pretty much all you need to do. Now you go to your wading towel and you dry off, and that's it. And within about 45 minutes, if you go into the lake, you'll already be primed, and you really won't feel it. You won't have that immersion shock response, the spike in the heart rate, the spike in the respiration rate. So try it out. If it works, it's great. Give it a shot. Thanks, and see you at the lake.